It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode on this long Anzac weekend break. Certainly hope that you're enjoying the upside of maybe just doing nothing. We are, on the other hand, talking property. Over 1,000 episodes available to you to listen to anytime, anywhere. And it is a Sunday today, April the 27th. Man, oh man, May is nearly here. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to be checking in on Orange in New South Wales. There's a bit of an appetite for the regional movement to take life a little bit slower. And later in the week, we're going to be finding out from Patrick in California about these tariffs biting the real estate industry. And Trump seems to have boxed himself into a corner over. And across the last 7 days, we've been featuring more real estate professionals. If you missed any of them, we've got a recap coming up, including Lisa Pinnell, the CEO of Barry Plant. Now, they've got 70 offices in Victoria, and Lisa is very much committed to mentoring new real estate talent coming through. Also, this past week, we spoke to Brett Sutton from Parramatta. We were talking about families earning $200,000 plus, and they are finding themselves barely scraping by. And Elliot Gill was here from Melbourne. So all of that is coming up after this.
Grab your weekly dose of inspiration to help build a real estate portfolio. We talk to the best in the business every day. Learn from the professionals and know your property with us.
I think there are certainly some really great things about AI. Like I say, there are some things that really concern me that can be confusing for consumers. It's really about using that technology in a way, as I say, that we can take away the basic functions that don't require that human interaction. But we all need to remember that transacting property is one of the top 10 stresses in life. A computer's not going to hold your hand, whether it's a tenant, a landlord, a buyer or a seller, that we are actually human to human.
Yeah, and that's really important. You mentioned that there's a little bit of concern around the AI. Where's your concern? I'd be really interested to hear that.
I saw a presentation at a tech event where the person on stage was showing agents how to create videos where AI can create the video of the person and in fact can have the voice speaking in a different language. That's fine as long as that agent is disclosing at the beginning of the video that it's an avatar and, you know, the language that they're speaking on screen. I'm concerned if AI is not used and used transparently with consumers. So I think it's fine to use those sorts of things. They can be really helpful, but it's really important that we're disclosing to customers if they're interacting with AI as opposed to a human being. And that's probably where my concern lies, you know, that agents understand that, and do consumers understand what they're dealing with?
You're pretty hot on sort of being committed to mentoring talent there at Barry Plant. So important, you know, to give a new person coming through all of the skills, the tools, and the right sort of messaging and advice to set them up to give them some sort of a chance, a realistic chance to last a little bit longer beyond that 12-month threshold where so many of them are dropping out.
Again, the pivot point for that cultural piece is the director in office. I absolutely have adored building a high-performing team here at our head office, and we have a great team in the corporate environment, and we have a great group of directors. So our focus, particularly this year, is on leadership. How do we all elevate, myself included? I don't believe that good culture is separate to high performance. I think that if you're performing well as a team, that is job satisfaction. So I don't think, I think culture is all about high performance as well, creating job satisfaction, helping people reach limits that perhaps they never believed that they could. That's the real joy. And of course, that's where you get great outcomes as well, because if my people feel safe, if our directors' people feel safe, and they're then going to show up their very best for the end customer.
Yes, these lofty goals where people go down the rabbit hole, and we've talked about this before. New agents look at things on television, they might be looking at social media, they might be looking at the way that things are being painted in such a way that it's like, yeah, I could probably achieve that. They go into real estate with an unrealistic expectation. And I guess you, as the head of an organisation, you've got to kind of put those parameters in place where it's it's like, yes, you can achieve that, but this is the sort of track that you've got to take in order to do that.
Well, and I think too, that's part of where the industry may have gone wrong is we're holding up these enormous commission numbers and celebrating that. That's actually not the way our group operates. The end result of all of the hard work is obviously the payoff. But if that's your motivation, you won't actually be using that moral compass that we talked about. You need to act with purpose and, providing that framework so that people can act with purpose within our business and act according to the Barry Plant values. And again, outcomes assured, we all like to make a good living. That's fine. But if that's your motivation, your chances of actually getting there and building a sustainable business are wrong.
But prior to social media, you didn't have all of that so visibly and in plain sight for younger people to look at and then aspire to. So it does create that sort of false narrative, which at the end of the day, you've got to rein that in a little bit.
Well, I'm really fortunate here at Barry Plant. The very first high performers event I went to was fascinating, Craig, particularly given my previous history where I was used to certain patterns of behaviour from high-performing agents. And I went to this fantastic event, as they always are, beautiful places, beautiful wines, beautiful food. But I was looking around the room thinking, these people just look like normal people. They're talking like normal people. They're not carrying, $10,000 handbags or doing other things that that might be part of that caricature of a real estate agent. They're just normal humans. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about this group is that, even the high performers are very normal and very relatable and very humble. We're not a group that grandstands about, writing millions of dollars. It's just not the way we operate.
Don't navigate the real estate market alone. Let us help guide you in the world of real estate every day. Make better informed decisions with the latest news and insights.
Yes, we're finding that there's this group of people who have done everything right by the textbooks. They've gone on to get tertiary educations, they're earning good incomes, they've bought their house in the suburbs, and they're finding that they're now a prisoner of that scenario in the fact that with the rising house prices, typically salaried positions without a lot of wage growth, the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing, childcare as the family grows, these people are left with $0 left at the end of the week and having to make decisions about how they put food on the table.
Yes, people listening will definitely, Brett, be thinking, how is this possible when they're earning over $200,000 for the household income? Now, I get this on both sides of the equation. I have had the economists, the experts, they tell me that mortgage stress is easing across Australia right now. It's getting better. And then I hear the opposite, which is what we're talking about this morning. But I think that both can be true at the same time. It just very much depends on what you bought, how you leveraged yourself into that mortgage loan, and the way that the market dramatically changed on you, particularly after COVID, as to how you have been affected. And that's kind of what's happened with a lot of these cases.
Yes, spot on. The norm in 5 of Australia's capital cities now is that the average price of real estate is $1 million. So you have to start there. So anybody that's purchased in the last few years has had to borrow a lot of money just to get into the market. The average wage, unfortunately, no longer can afford the average capital city property. Couple that with the fact that there's been a real decline in living standards since the middle of 2002, and that's approximately 8%, plus pretty stagnant wage growth. And we end up in this situation that people are, looking at the rising cost of bills and wondering how they can put it all together. There will be people out there who will go, oh, poor them, they've got their house, whatever else. But unfortunately for many of these people, that if they sell the property and go and rent, it's not a considerable saving for them.
And stagnant wage growth, that is such a big problem in the climate that we are currently living in because of the way that the property market took off and has increased. We never will keep up in terms of the wages. And this looks set to just continue on its merry way. Obviously, things might change a little bit with people being a little bit more circumspect with new purchases and the interest rates coming back. But for those that bought at the top of the market, still quite a lot of decision making to take place.
Yeah, absolutely. The great reshuffle that happened post-COVID, or the great resignation as it was in the headlines at the time, where there was lots of opportunities, the people did seem to get, a bit of a bump in wages as they moved around. That hid this for a period of time. And I think we're now finding the last couple of years, as savings are depleting, household savings have gone down. We're just in this situation now that as rates come down, that saving is going to go towards the cost of living in another area. So I don't see a lot of relief for a lot of these households until there's something happens at a higher level in terms of wages or cost of living relief.
Yeah, and when you're talking six-figure salaries and, a couple that are collectively earning over 200 grand and they're scraping by, only just scraping by, the dream home with no cash flow isn't a lot of fun, particularly when you've got the likes of, I think you've mentioned this, kids being pulled out of sports, all the luxuries are gone, every single dollar is accounted for.
Yeah, I genuinely believe it impacts productivity across the whole economy, where you look at it and go, well, the harder I work, I'm not getting any further in front. It just leads to burnout, job dissatisfaction. I'm not sure where the answer is amongst those people who are experiencing this, because unfortunately there's no cheap alternative anymore. I look around, Sydney, where we're based, and you go, all right, well, what if you move out a little bit further? It doesn't seem to get much cheaper.
If you look at the Melbourne market, I think what we're seeing in the market right now is really conducive to an upsize. I think before the market starts to move in Melbourne, the Melbourne market's been quite flat for a while. I think the gap between what they're currently in and selling and what they're upsizing to is smaller when the market is not as strong. Once the market starts to kick, that gap widens. The market may start moving later this year. So finally in Melbourne, and I think the upsizes should really start looking very quickly now before the market starts to move.
So upgraders at the moment, they can leverage quite a bit from the equity in their property, particularly over the last 5 years. That can be quite significant, can't it, in this market there in Melbourne?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the equity in Melbourne has been challenging to build because the market has been a lot of sales, but not a lot of capital growth. If they can see some of that to be able to move into the larger property, that's great. But in a lot of cases in Melbourne, if you've held, say, for the last 5 years, you've been largely treading water.
Yeah, and just sort of expanding out a little bit on that, the upgraders typically do sell first. The fear factor in that is not being able to find that next property. But with more stock coming onto the market, how is that equilibrium sort of working out?
It's a really natural fear to worry about not finding that perfect next home, which you want to be in for 10 years. But it's all about the timing. I do highly recommend any upsizer to be selling first. It's a much safer option. But you've just got to time and you've got control of that sale. So typically a good option, depending on the market that you're in, is to sell just before those busy markets, which can be early in the year, that sort of March, April period, or that spring market. And a lot of the bigger family homes in Melbourne come on the market in spring to get ready for the next school year. But if you can sell maybe in that August, September period when it's slightly quieter, it can be a really good time to then be able to cash out of your current home and be able to pick the eyes out of the market over that really busy spring market.
Now, I want to talk about bankers because some of them encourage people to look at the equity that they've got in their homes and consider a bridging loan so that they don't miss out on their dream property. That line from bankers when they say you should consider this bridging loan because you've got a lot of equity in your home and we don't want you to miss out on a dream property. I would say, because I'm not a fan at all, Elliot, of a bridging loan, particularly if you've got a ton of equity. It just comes down to the fact, do you really want to start looking at properties before your property sells? Because if you do that, you can get into that danger zone of, I'm falling in love with this property, now I've got to buy it.
Yeah, look, I'm personally not a fan of bridging loans either, but I think they're a necessary backup. Basically, if you do go and buy something, I do find there's a lot of owners out there that have every intention to try to sell first, but then, of course, the perfect property comes up at the worst possible time prior to them being ready, and sometimes emotion gets in the way and they go and buy it with maybe going into it very confidently that their property will achieve a certain price, but not every time it goes exactly according to plan. So if you're a little bit risk averse, I'd certainly suggest to be selling first, but the bridging loans are certainly there for a purpose and are very helpful. But if you're certainly upsizing, I'd highly recommend selling first.
So we have distributed in our time around 20,000 shoeboxes of love solely to disaster-affected communities. However, because of the generosity of our donors and the position that we're in terms of the items we have access to, we have been able to also channel support to people who have been affected by house fires. We support a number of local organisations with toiletries that wouldn't be suitable for the boxes that we distribute, but are suitable for use for other purposes. What we're finding and what we have found over the last 12 to 18 months is that the need for basic hygiene items, so your toothbrushes, your toothpaste, deodorant, sanitary products, shampoos and conditioners, the demand has risen so significantly that charities are struggling to keep up with demand. So we have sort of pivoted a little bit and channeled out in providing support still to the disaster affected communities, but also to people in our local community that are experiencing economic hardship. And some of the stories that we hear are really sad. So I know we still monitor our budget and we're not doing it as tough as what other families are. We're just conscious of what we spend. But if we need a new toothbrush or more toothpaste, we go and buy it. Some people are not in a financial position where they can do that. And I think my heart breaks at the idea that people can't afford the basics that they need just to maintain a standard of personal hygiene. But that has a flow-on effect on self-esteem, self-confidence, on presentation, on mental health. And that leads into further health concerns and health conditions as well. So we are trying to support as many different organisations and community pantries as we can with those essential hygiene items.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.